Hello and welcome back. My name is Paget Kagy. I am a frequency healer and quantum coach, helping you make sense of energy and this reality so that you can live your best possible life. And this is my husband. If you saw our last podcast episode together, Steve. Hello, Steve. He's the non-spiritual one in our relationship. And really, I wanted to come back on here because I feel like in our last discussion, thank you guys so much for leaving the comments. I read every single one of them. But when I was actually like even just reflecting back on that episode, it was so good because it was such a good reflection of, I feel like, where we are right now and the kinds of conversations we can have right now. But it didn't really portray where we have come from, which I think is really important because some of you guys I noticed were like, yeah, but my issue is like my husband doesn't even want to talk about these deeper things. He doesn't even want to get into it. And so I just really wanted to provide this perspective in this episode, where we have come from, how far we have come, where did we start? So yeah, we're just going to get into it, and it's going to maybe be a little messy. It's going to maybe be a little embarrassing. We're going to reveal some things that maybe we don't want to reveal. But it's all good, right? Because it's all in the spirit of us learning, us growing, us getting better, us evolving together. So I'm ready to have some fun. Sweetie, are you ready?
Of course I am.
Uh-oh.
Let's go.
So just as like a side note, Steve generally does not like talking about the past.
No,
he's like, I don't really want to open that. I don't really want to open that box again because I'm scared of what's going to crawl out of it.
it just brings up a lot of like things that I don't really love to talk about and
100%.
things to admit as well.
Of course.
Yeah.
But you know what, sweetie? I think even just having these discussions and sharing them, it's going to be such an amazing exercise in just totally getting rid of all the shame that we have around even past versions of ourselves. We had a lot of issues between us that we did not touch upon at all because it's so easy to forget when you've evolved so much where you've come from because you just don't have that perspective anymore. And at the time in the beginning, neither of us really wanted to take much responsibility for ourselves, like at all.
It's funny you say that because that was one of the thoughts I had is like, I remember times just like not wanting to do anything. And I think that in so many ways is like the epitome of not wanting to address anything.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah. Let's get into it.
Yeah, let's get into it. So, okay, when you really reflect back on our relationship, especially in the beginning, were you always open to change?
I would say that I would have said yes, but probably deep down, no. Because I think, over the course of 9 years, I think it's probably taken me 5 or 6. Right. And so the last episode, we were probably talking.
Give a different answer.
We were probably talking about the last 3.
I think
maybe it's difficult. It's always difficult when you go back to remember exact specifics, but you would generally remember like particular moments and how you felt in particular moments, for instance.
Yeah. So can I just share my perspective on the whole?
Please go ahead.
I mean, here's the thing. Okay. I'm going to say it's really only been probably in the past 2 years that I feel like you really began opening up. Like, I think a little before that, you were like, okay, I can't change this woman, so I'm going to learn patience and tolerance. Okay. So I give you a lot of credit for the patience and tolerance piece of that, because otherwise I wouldn't have gotten to where I am now without that tolerance and patience. Right.
Yeah.
Because at the time when I was running a whole bunch of self-sacrifice patterns and all of that and the burden patterns, his rejection of what I was doing, I would have just probably either run away, from it and not dealt with it, or I would have shut it down and shut a part of myself down and disempowered myself through that. So yeah, that was really necessary. But from my perspective, I don't feel like we really got the momentum of change until about 2 years ago. You know what I'm saying? Like the momentum of that change together until about 2 years ago.
It was, I think, 7 years of probably like 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 1 step forward, half a step forward, half a step back, right? I think we were spinning our wheels quite a bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's even just talk about how would you describe yourself? Okay, I'm going to do the same thing, Steve. All right.
Well, I would like to know how you would describe me too.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think I was pretty insecure even though I came across as if I like had everything together, I was obviously very career focused, like mid to late 20s, right? Like very career focused. That was a big thing for me. We touched upon this last time, pretty stubborn as well, I would say. Relatively emotionally closed off. Well, I say relatively, I think emotionally closed off is probably a big thing. Even though I'm a happy person, I might have been a little bit depressed. And I think, yeah, just generally not willing to go to certain places that were for the best, like not willing to be vulnerable, not willing to talk about these types of things. And it all played out in the way that we'll get into probably.
Yeah. Like, so my perception of you, actually, you were very, very accurate in that, right? But I think there's a nuance in that where I could point, oh my God, guys, this is the magic of relationships. All right. Where I could just point my finger at you and I would have said all those things, like you're not patient, you're not understanding, you're not caring enough, you don't want to go into deep conversation, because that was something that someone commented, like my husband doesn't even want to go into deep conversation.
Yeah.
You were pretty closed off to new ways of looking at things and new ways of doing things. The same thing, the stubbornness and everything like that. You weren't willing to like go there emotionally. Like there was some blockage in you that didn't want to go to a deeper part of yourself emotionally.
Yeah. And I think that was the insecurity.
Okay.
Right. Like insecure, didn't want to go there, didn't know what was laying beyond if we opened up those cans of worms, either externally, but also probably more importantly for me, internally. Right. Wasn't sure if I was really solid in myself to be able to go there with you, if that makes sense.
Totally. And that's the whole thing that really, I think at some point in our journeys really blocks us too. And I will say this for myself, is like, we're scared of, if we dig deeper beyond the mask, beyond the defenses that we've really spent a lot of our lives trying to build up, beyond the protective layers, we're scared shitless. Like what is actually underneath all that garbage? Because
what are we doing?
Yeah. Like what is that? Right. And so, what's so funny is that I'm realizing so much that all of the times that I was pointing my finger at Steve, I really should have been pointing my finger at myself, because listen to all the things that he said about himself. Now, I would never have been able to admit it at the time. I was all of those things too.
Yeah.
Right. I was
100%.
all of those things too. Very impatient, stubborn, not willing to see anything outside of my own perspective. That was one of our biggest issues.
Yeah.
We couldn't see outside of ourselves. And so, of course, we bumped heads. And of course, from my perspective, I'm 120% right. Right. And from his perspective, he's 120 million% right. And so it was just this clash.
Yeah.
But what we were not able to understand is actually we were being presented through each other a learning experience. We couldn't see it at the time. We were being presented to each other as a learning experience, meaning, oh my God, Steve, you are so stubborn. Oh my God, Paget, how are you so stubborn? Oh my gosh, Steve, you're not willing to go deeper. Oh my gosh, Paget, how are you not willing to see yourself at a deeper level?
What's interesting is I think until probably pretty recently, during that period of time, we would have said that we were very different.
Yes.
But actually we were pretty much exactly the same.
Yes, but this is what I was talking about in the last episode, where the more you elevate, guys, the more you clear out your garbage, guess what happens? Your perception clarifies as well, right? Your perception clarifies. Your ability to look at yourself clarifies. Your ability to see other people in their truth clarifies. And this is where what I defined as true love, you get to such a high level together that when you look at each other, you just see yourself, because there's no projection of blame. There's no denial of self. There's a complete self-acceptance. With that comes a complete self-acceptance of others as well. Yep. And so the higher and higher we're getting, the more we're seeing, oh my gosh, every single time I point a finger at you, Steve, now, oh my gosh, where's that finger? Oh, it's right at me. It's right at me.
I thought I was doing so much good for our relationship, and that you didn't care about me, or you were just, I don't know. I mean, there were so many memories of just like thinking like, what is happening here? Right. And I remember there was like one particular weekend when we went to Monterey, California, and it was an all right trip away. Like there was nothing major that blew up, but I just remember like certain periods of time just being so depressed, not wanting to do anything, because I just didn't feel like you cared. I don't know if that's the right word or the right emotion, but like it wasn't quite hitting, and we weren't able to really talk about it on the same terms. And I think during that period of our relationship, we were just like missing each other in like all sorts of different directions.
Totally. That's something that I've noticed more and more how, so, you know, I will complain, oh, Steve, you're not being caring enough. Steve, you're not paying attention. Steve, you're not, you know, giving me the kind of affection I want. But then I notice that there are other times where it's like, it's reflected back to you in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I know one of your biggest things was like, you're not being acknowledged, you're not being understood. And like, maybe in some ways that translated to, I don't really care. But then it's so funny that from my perspective, you know, if you would listen to like the things that conversation I would have with like my sister or my parents or something, it's like, well, he doesn't really understand me. He doesn't really care about the things that I care about.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were just reflecting back to each other exactly our own pain points, right? And our own like sore spots. And it wasn't really about the other person. It was really about ourselves just being reflected back in the other person.
How do you think we should have handled it? Like, what would have been the better approach? Because I also do think that there's an element of this, which is like, we'd only been in a relationship for like 12 or 18 months, right? And you go through that difficult phase where the honeymoon phase wears off. It gets a little bit more serious. You're like thinking, okay, am I going to be doing this for the next 50, 60 years of my life, right? And you have that like, oh my gosh, is this the right person to commit to moment? Like, what should we have done? Because just saying like, oh, be more open, have a, you know, sit down and talk about, like, understand the other person's perspective sounds great. But in actuality, I think that's really difficult to do.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. It's like we can say all these things in retrospect, right? From where we are now, but looking back at where we were then, that wouldn't have done it. It wouldn't have done it because neither of us were actually in the place to open up in that space anyway. So even if we had like an outside there, and by the way, we tried couples therapy. Like, actually, that's absolutely fucking hilarious. Wait, hold on. We should actually talk about it. But we tried couples therapy. Okay. So we got through 2 sessions. Did we go through 2 sessions or just 1?
Maybe 3.
No, I think it was 2.
We definitely went more than once.
We missed the 3rd session. Why? Because we got into a giant argument. And so we couldn't make it there. And so I literally had to text the woman, I'm sorry, we just got into a fight. We cannot make a couples therapy session. Sorry. Which is so ironic. You cannot make that up. And I remember you went on a walk because you were so angry. And I was just like, oh, great. Now I have to cancel the couples therapy session. Look like embarrassing. You know, it just...
You had a number. I didn't. So...
Yeah, I understand. But I'm just saying, like, right, just in that period of time that we were in, everything was like me against you, me versus you, me versus you, me. When really...
There was no sense of us whatsoever.
No, there really, really wasn't. And it's amazing that... And I love us, by the way, taking the time to go through this because it's so easy to forget. I actually almost had amnesia, like, about this period of time because... you know,
quite rightly. I mean, you wanted to blank it out.
Yeah, I guess I did, but I was like, are we even going to be able to film this podcast? Because I can't even remember these things. But actually, as we're in this space together and like in this space with you guys too, we're able to actually now tap back in. So I'm able to now tap back into what that was. Yeah, we weren't in the space to be able to have those conversations because, and here's the thing, you ask, okay, well, what should we have done? But if we're being really honest with ourselves, the only thing that we could have done was looked within ourselves. The only thing we were actually really equipped to do, and maybe not even equipped to do this yet, clearly, was look at ourselves and be like, I need to work on myself. What is it in me that is creating this disconnect in my reality? Because Steve was simply reflecting my own disconnect that I felt with my own self-worth, my own disconnect that I felt with my own worthiness, my own value, my own emotional availability with myself, my own authenticity, my own truth, all of the things that I was denying myself from within. He was merely reflecting that, and I was merely reflecting his own disconnect with himself in our relationship. That is the only, we got to the answer already, guys. And we're going to get like more into like some of the physical stuff of how we handled things. We could have done things differently, but I am telling you that is the only cure. It is the only cure. When you fix the disconnect within you is when you fix the disconnect in your relationship, period.
I thought it was 100% you and I was absolutely perfect. like the irony now that I can look back with retrospect and, you know, the sense of where we are today is just crazy.
Right? Like I'm actually because I'm tapping into what you're tapping into with the Monterey thing. And it's the first time. I love having these podcasts actually with you because we don't really have a lot of reasons to revisit these things, but it's the first time I'm seeing it from your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Like as I tap into you right now, it's the first time I'm seeing like where men a lot of times, and I'm just going to say men because you're a man, the fear of commitment comes in because you go, it's like this dark cloud that comes over that goes, is this the rest of my life? Like, is this going to be what my life is? This like sort of disconnected, sort of like back into like this harsh reality of like the grittiness, the dullness of life. Is this it?
I mean, imagine if we'd stuck together. And I mean, I have to give you a lot of credit here. If we hadn't gone on this journey together, like what a recipe for disaster it could have been.
It's amazing because like when I look into the future from what you were seeing, it was like dull, disconnected, no joy, just depressing, just like getting on with it, just doing the things we need to do. Like, hey, Steve, you need to take a try. Steve, you need to do this. Steve, you need to work. Steve, you need to do that. You know, like I'm just like, you know, just in my own depressing bubble as well. And both two people depressed, just like sharing a depressed bubble. Existence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but that's really the only way because like we couldn't have climbed out of it pointing fingers at each other. Mm-hmm. We just simply could not have done it. And I think that's where most people, quote, go wrong is they just think it's the other person and they are so unwilling to look at themselves. And this goes for business. This goes for success. Guys, if you're hitting up against something over and over and over again in an aspect of your life, you got to look at yourself. It is not about the business. It is not about this person. It is not about that colleague. It is not about this, right? It is always about something within you that is being reflected through your external reality. And that is the biggest lesson that you can ever learn that has completely transformed myself, my life, and our lives. Mm-hmm. And so, man, this is... like, I don't even know. Actually, now I'm just seeing so many of the phases of our relationship. Like, how did we even get out of that? Do you even remember?
I don't even know. Now, I was just asking myself that same question. And I do think we were fortunate insofar as like, we have a lot of like shared values. We have a lot of common ground, not day-to-day things, but like where we can be fun, where we can be silly, shared interests. We love to travel, right? We thankfully lived relatively independent lives outside of our own relationships. So yes. You were busy trying to do your things. I was busy with work, right? And that we, you know, I think that helped massively because we weren't spending a huge amount of time together, like pre-COVID, right? You know, there could be only a few hours a week or the weekends where we actually spent time together. And I think that healed us in many ways, if that makes sense.
Yes. I mean, I do actually remember the turning point. Like, so do you remember the turning point? Because I don't know like what happened. So in between like this stage, the Monterey stage where, oh my God, the honeymoon phase is over. Mm-hmm. This is feeling a little disconnected to like, oh shit, like something has to change. Mm-hmm. I think we were both so occupied with what we were trying to do. Yep. Like within our own lives, like I was pursuing acting, not very successful at it, but I was still doing a lot of stuff, right? He was doing a lot. He was very occupied with his own job and his work and his career. But I remember the first turning point. So I want to know if it's the same for you.
Well, no, you tell me and then I'll say yes or no.
Okay. So the first turning point in our relationship actually, and this goes back to, and I say this to my clients a lot, like things have to sometimes fundamentally break down before you can rebuild better. And sometimes if your foundation is so crappy, like it has to happen. You can't get around that. It can't be in like pieces. Like it has to break down. So I remember it got so bad. Like at some points we were fighting so much. I had to like drive home to my parents, spend the night there because like I just couldn't be in the same, we couldn't be in the same space with each other. I was like, we were constantly on the verge of breaking up and like we were fighting. I mean, it had to have been every day, if not every other day. And the days we weren't fighting, we were just like avoiding fighting. And it was
relationship?
I know, like, right. And so, and I really want to highlight all this stuff though, Steve, because it's important for people to see that it's not just like necessarily the relationship dysfunction. It is something that is happening that the universe is trying to tap them on the shoulder and like give them a wake up call.
Yeah.
And so one of the turning points that I remember is like we were both at our wits' end. Credit to Steve. He was always the kind of person, and this goes back to some of his programming of being really loyal and sticking things through and just being very consistent, being the consistent guy. Okay. So it worked to his credit at this point where he just wasn't willing to give up. And I'm more of the kind of person who I'm like, I'm just going to cut it off if it's not working, like, fuck you, whatever, right? It's my defensive mechanism to cut things off and move on. Also not a great mechanism. But I remember like there was that turning point when I could feel that he had given up.
Yeah.
Like he had given up. He's like, he got to a point where he was like, I have given everything from his perspective. I have tried to do everything. And I've just given up. And I remember he just went into his office and he was just like sitting there and my heart was breaking because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it. Like we're done. Because, you know, when he's given up, really, this is the end of the line. And then I just started going, wow, we're really done. You know, we're really done. And it hit me and I just resolved within myself. I think I was in the kitchen and I went, okay, so let's see. Okay, so how do we move forward? So I guess I'm going to have to move out, right? Because we bought this place together, but really you bought it. And I'm going to have to move out. How am I going to move out? I don't know the answers yet, but I know that that's the right thing for me to do. And just make this a clean break. And so I remember I went into the office and I sat down on the floor and I was like, look, like I will like give me a couple of months and then I will move out. And then I started to cry, and it wasn't like a cry of like, you know, it wasn't a cry from being the victim. It wasn't the cry from like, hey, you're doing this to me. It was like a cry of like, oh shoot, like this is really the end. And that's sad. And I think because I broke within myself, like that layer of hardness broke within me, I think it broke something within you too.
100%, yeah.
And so I remember I walked out of your office and I just wanted time for myself to like process through it. And then you came out of your office shortly thereafter and then we hugged. And then what did you say? I remember what you said. I don't know.
I've got no bloody idea.
So Steve said to me as we were hugging, he's like, why does this feel like the first time we've connected in a really long time?
Oh, yeah, there we are. It was profound.
It was profound. It was this moment of everything, just like of us having to that's the moment of letting go. Yeah. That's the moment of surrender. That's the moment
I think that was, you brought back a lot of memories for me that I don't think I'd revisited.
I know, right? It's crazy.
But I think what you said immediately before that was like the key within that period of time, which was the accumulation of maybe, I'm trying to think, maybe like 12, 18 months of like little things here and there, right? Missing each other, the bad emotions, the fights, all of these other different types of things. But it was that point where we finally broke down some of the hardness and the stubbornness and the I'm right, you're wrong type things. And we were just like, well, actually, no, like there's more to it. Like, I think we both saw the errors in our ways and we weren't ready to like quit because the good times were really good.
Yeah.
Right. And you would only ever do that if you thought there was something positive that was potentially out there.
I think it was that when we finally realized that, because the biggest issue in relationships, like fundamentally, is this belief that the other person doesn't care enough. Right. So if you think about it, all the fights that you get into, whether it's the jealousy or anything, it's like the belief that the person doesn't care enough. The person doesn't love you enough. And I think when I broke down, it was really just, I think, exposing at a deeper level, like, wait, I did actually care, but I just didn't know how to show it.
Yeah.
And we weren't in the place to be able to express that to each other.
What did the therapist tell us? It was probably the best piece of advice.
I don't remember what the therapist told us.
She said we have different love language.
Oh God.
Right. Like, affection, whatever it is, action or
right.
I don't even know what they were.
I'm going to be honest, guys. I'm not great at this stuff. Like I'll learn it and I'm like, oh, too hard to implement.
It is like going to school.
Yeah, I'm not an academic. I used to be an academic person. I'm not an academic person at all. I can't like learn ABCs of stuff. It just either aligns. I just either figure out the energetics of it or I don't, which is my issue. That is actually my stubbornness where I just like to understand the root cause of stuff. I don't like to play around with like some of the more superficial stuff, which is important sometimes, right? But I think that's really what it was, right? And I don't think we understood that at a conscious level, but we just felt it. Because you're right, the thing that really kept us together was reflecting to me personally on the first 6 months of our relationship, which was absolute magic and joy and it was just so in sync. It was literally like La La Land, right? When they do that whole...
they're probably writing it at the point where...
Yeah. They're writing at the point of the first 6 months where it just felt like we were both dancing together in LA, exploring LA, Shakespeare in the Park, the Getty Museum, like Disneyland.
Sunsets in Griffith Park.
Pantages, all of this stuff. We were so active. We're doing everything, exploring Los Angeles in this magical dreamland. Then all of a sudden reality hits and it's like, whoa, I don't know who you are anymore. And then we went through that whole phase for a very long time. So that was like one of the turning points where I feel like we got more into who we actually are, right? And we were able to see more of who we were and accept that. Like, do you have any other points that you think, okay, that was when we really started to gel together? Can you point to a point in which that happened?
There's never normally like one particular point, but an accumulation of different points and movements and dynamics and life events and everything else that sort of get in the way. So I don't know if I can point to a particular moment, but I think it was more of an evolution or a journey. So once we sort of went through that really difficult time and we finally broke down into that, like, this is the first time we've connected, we let our guards down a little bit. Still wasn't easy, right? We've still gone through some ups and downs since then, but I think it was the beginning of a different outlook on each other and our relationship, which then has continued to evolve into what it's become.
Yeah. I mean, I think, there are different stages of evolution, but I think every single part of that evolution included accountability on both of our ends to some degree, right? And the more and more we could understand that, it's about accountability. It's about looking at ourselves. It's about looking, right? And the more we could actually just agree, accountability, myself, it's about me, the quicker the acceleration, the quicker the evolution of us, like independently, and the evolution of us together as well. And actually one of the big turning points for me, from my perspective, that really shifted not just our relationship, but shifted me, was actually when we were taking a walk outside with Kika. And I remember like I had this projection of you not being a very supportive person to me, you not really supporting my dreams, you not believing in me that I could be like successful, all of this stuff. Right. I just felt like, okay, he doesn't really believe in me. He doesn't really believe I can make it happen. He doesn't really believe that this is a possibility for me and all of this stuff. Again, guys, he was just merely reflecting my own self-doubt, my own energetic disconnect from the dreams that I wanted, my own like inability to take responsibility and really make things happen for myself. So the turning point was we were walking, and I don't remember exactly how we were talking about this, but you said something that was a little disbelieving of what I wanted to do. And then I said to you, and then I said to you, I was like, you know what? I don't care if you believe in me. I don't need you to believe in me anymore because I believe in me. And it was in that moment that I remember, like, I just took responsibility for him triggering me by not believing in me. And I'm like, it's not about what he thinks about me. It's not about him. It's about me. And and it was actually in that moment that I remember I was like, this is all about me. This is all about my own evolution. This is all about me becoming a better version of me. This is all about me. It's not about me trying to prove him wrong. It's about me. And that was a huge turning point. And actually, Steve, whether you remember it or not, it was actually after that day that you became so much more what I would see as like supportive and more believing in me than ever before.
When was this? I've got absolutely no idea
I know.
Sounds like I've got the worst memory in the world, but you asked me a sports question and
I
remember
know
it from
because
25 years ago.
that's the thing, Steve, because it was from my perception, and that's everything that matters, is like the energy that so for you, it wasn't a big deal because you weren't even thinking about what was happening. For me, it was a big deal because it was my trigger. It was my thing that I was going, my process. And you were just, again, he was just a mirror, right? A mirror doesn't remember every time you look at the mirror. The mirror is just a mirror. It's just doing its thing, right? But you remember the time you looked in the mirror and you're like, whoa, I got a huge booger on my face, right? The mirror doesn't remember. It's just a mirror. So it was that moment that I was like, oh my God, I have a huge booger on my face. And then I had to deal with that myself. And then when I took accountability for myself in that moment, and then I went on my own journey to go, look, I'm just going to focus on me.
Yeah.
I don't need your approval. I don't need your opinion. I don't need anything from you in that respect. It's all about me.
Yeah.
That my journey actually really began.
And I agree with that, because I actually think probably for the first 6 or 7 years of our relationship, like I felt you always needed a lot of validation from me, or a lot of my support to go and do things that were very much like your things to go and do. Like you were in the acting industry. I had no idea about Hollywood, and you were asking me questions. I'm like, I've got no idea. How am I going to help you? Right. And I tried to give you all of this insight and support and encouragement. And then I think you felt like it wasn't good enough. Or it wasn't enough encouragement.
Because I was because I was asking you to make up for what I didn't have within me.
Exactly. And then I was like, well, I'm giving you all of this, but apparently it's not good enough. I'm like, what do you expect? So I also think that is definitely true, right? Each of us taking accountability for our own careers, decisions, lives, actions, even moods, right? For instance, right? Yeah. Like that happens a lot. Even recently in our relationship, I remember once I had a pretty crappy day, and on a Friday night, you were like, just don't take it out on me. Like, just because you've had a bad day doesn't mean like I'm your punching bag. And I was like, all right, that is actually quite fair. So. Yeah.
Right. So this is another important lesson. Sorry, guys, my eyes are like really dry. And the fan overhead is not.
You should try and get sponsored by this.
I know I should really get sponsored by Refresh Plus.
Unbelievable product.
But it's clearly not doing enough of a job, because I'm literally having to put this in my eyeballs like every 5 seconds. But anyway, so actually they're not going to want to sponsor this. No. But so yeah, because that's another really important lesson too, is that. So for me, one of the biggest issues in terms of wanting to commit in a relationship, or wanting to be in a like I've had some commitment issues or doubts here and there, right, throughout a relationship, is because I have run the pattern of burden. I have run the pattern of self-sacrifice, where I allow other people who I'm in a friendship with, who I'm in a relationship with, my career, every single thing, to burden me, to be able to project their stuff onto me that all of a sudden becomes my issue. Right. And I didn't even realize I was doing this, but I was doing this for the longest time in everything. And there are layers to this. So I was doing this for the longest time in like way too much in everything, where if a friend had an issue, guess what? They could call me, they could interrupt my entire day. Right. I remember it was Valentine's Day, and then a particular person called me saying that they had an issue, and like we were enjoying Valentine's Day. I just picked up the phone. I'm like, yes. Okay. Coached them through it like for 30 minutes or something like that.
I think it's more like 2 hours.
Okay, like totally interrupting my whole day, right? Because I was running this pattern, and I thought that was what gave me value as a person. Can I take on the burden of other people? And so I've run it at varying degrees, but it's such an important lesson, because if you run this pattern, guess what? Your relationships will weigh you down. Yeah. It will sink you. They will literally sink you, not because there's something wrong with the other person, not because there's something wrong with the relationship necessarily, because there's something wrong with you. In that you feel as though you energetically need to take on the burden of everything around you, which is why it's actually one of the biggest energetic patterns that I see that holds people back in success, holds people back in relationships, holds people back in every aspect of their lives. Okay. And they don't even realize they're doing it. So just a point of reflection, if you tend to do that, and women tend to do this a lot, they tend to unconsciously take on the burdens of everything around them, whether it's their clients, their partners, their colleagues, their family, whatever it is, it will weigh you down. It will keep you from getting the life that you want. And so an important lesson here is, one of the things that we've had to go through together is, you got used to me taking on your burden. I got used to taking on your burden. So when we had to make these like shifts, when part of that was me going, I'm not taking this on for you anymore. I'm sorry. And I know that it feels really shitty. And I know that you want to hate me right now because I'm not operating as the function that I used to. But this is not my function in the relationship. That has actually been a huge thing for our relationship, I think, because we didn't realize it, but I think it was also contributing to me feeling resentful at a deeper level. Me not like sometimes being like, oh, why am I committing to this? Right. Sometimes, also the feeling like I'm your parent, feeling like I'm your sibling, like, you know, those dynamics. The maid,
which is amazing.
Yeah. And here's another thing, like, right. I just inherited that through my, family. Where like as the woman gets older, she ends up being like the old maid, right? She ends up being the person who just serves the guy and just has to go along with what the guy does and just, right? And so that was the pattern.
You would make a very good maid, by the way. So I'm glad that you're not the maid.
But it was like the old maid pattern, right? Where it's like, I get older and I feel like I'm the maid and I lose my vibrance and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I have to serve you. But that was my responsibility to shed.
It was.
But very important lesson in our relationship, because then what did it do for you?
Well, I think it, one, made me look at myself a little bit more.
Yeah.
Right. And that I think is one of the key takeaways. Two, I think, well, the reason why it made me look at myself is a bit more is because it did change our dynamic, which is important, right? If nothing changes, nothing changes. Like something had to shift. And I think through those shifts and some of the other conversations and journeys that we've been on, like you then get into the right way of thinking and the right patterns, if that makes sense. So on that Friday when you're moaning at me because I'm putting all of my, you know, work baggage on you, and you say those words, I'm like, yeah, that's actually quite fair. And then you can quickly sort of be like, I'm sorry, that's not right of me.
Yeah.
And then you can actually move past that instantly almost.
Yeah. Well, you've gotten to the point where now you can move past it instantly. And I will give you so much credit for that. Like as you've actually evolved, and I know I talk about you like a Pokemon, but I will say like, this is the work that I do. Yep. So when I like look at my reality, I'm looking at you too. Okay. But what, from my perspective, energetically, what I've seen happen for you as I've stepped more into like, this is not my role, is that you really stepped more into your masculine, and you did it like, again, right? He just adjusted. Like you just adjusted. Like, I know that you look at things through mindset. I see everything as energy, but it's literally like, I will see Steve the next day or the next week, and I will feel that he has shifted. I will see energetically that he has shifted. Now, whether Steve wants to admit that or not, I want you to talk about how you feel like you have personally evolved on this journey. Can
we save that for another day? Because I think that's such a deep question.
Yeah.
And we've covered a lot of ground.
We have covered a lot of ground. So, guys, you know where we've come from. We've come from
that was also a commitment that you get me back for another episode as well.
Oh, yeah. Guys, if you want Steve to come back, please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button. Please leave a comment below encouraging Steve and his ego to want to come back for a third episode and beyond too, because we don't just want to talk about a relationship. We want to talk about other things too. We actually have a lot of really, we talk about a lot of interesting stuff together from a different perspective, obviously. But just so you know, guys, like where we are now in being able to have these kinds of conversations like this on here, and being able to share certain things that we do right now, it was not even close to being that in the beginning of our like take one of the more toxic relationships you can think of. That was us. Well, I will say my friends, when they heard certain things, they were like, Paget, like you need to leave that relationship. I'm not even like my theater friends from like that little theater thing that I did a long time ago. They were like, Paget, this doesn't sound good. Like, I think you need to leave the relationship. Of course, I was speaking from my perspective as the victim of like, he's doing all of these things.
They probably think I'm such a horrible person.
It's funny, right? But anyway, right? This is all about your own growth. This is all about your own journey. It's all about what is the other person reflecting in you. It is never really about the other person. If And we are going to get more into that, like how, like the process of evolution and what it takes from someone who is not really into this kind of stuff at all, doesn't really think about these things at all. It'll be really interesting. So we are going to get into that in our next podcast. But thank you for joining. Also leave comments below about like suggestions about other kinds of topics you'd like us to talk about. We are so open to it now that we got Steve and we got him hooked and he can't leave. Steve, what do you want? Do you have anything to say about this?
No, I've enjoyed it.
You have?
Thank you for taking a trip down memory road with me.
Oh, he did an uncomfortable trip down memory road. That's why
good.
he wants.
It was good. Yeah. Because it brought up a lot, but it also made me appreciate one, how we worked past it, two, where we've come from, and then three, what the keys to success are moving forward.
Totally. Yes. So guys, again, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, give Steve some encouragement, and I will see you all later. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something. I hope you got something out of our journey, because we had to go through a lot of messiness, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of mistakes that we could have really shortcut if we understood the steps that it took in order for us to get to where we want to go. The accountability piece, the self-evolution for yourself within the relationship. And this is why I put together the frequency elevation series called Quantum Love. It's 14 modules. It goes over some of the most common energetic patterns and blocks that I had to learn, that I had to release, that I had to go through, that I had to experience with Steve and try to figure out, so that you can shortcut this process, so that you understand what is coming up in your relationships. You can release the patterns quicker. You can elevate your frequency, whether that means you're more energetically ready to meet the person that you want to take that life journey with, or you've already found that person and you want to deepen your connection. You want to understand how to unlock the next level of that love, or if you just want to deepen that self-love within yourself, because like I said, this is all a journey about you. As you elevate, as you embody that self-love within yourself, that is when someone else is going to be able to reflect that back to you. So if you want to go on that journey and you want to shortcut this whole process and learn from our mistakes, there is a link below where you can sign up and join Quantum Love. It is a super powerful frequency clearing series. It's going to really unearth some really deep, sticky stuff within your energetic field, because even when it comes to romantic love, this all starts with you.